mic. The mic's not on yet.
So, one step is.
Yeah, if it's me for 20 minutes.
All right, I'll do my best.
What am I doing?
Last time I actually was streaming it on YouTube as well, but
Just gonna hang.
Okay, HW Cam, we're going to get started.
Thank you.
Multiple generations.
Okay, testing. Julia, can you hear us now?
Knowing where I am, if it makes you feel better.
You know, we're live.
Yeah. All right, Julia, we are going to get started. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. All right. At this moment, I would like to call to order the meeting of the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School Committee on Thursday, November 17th, 2022 at 7:02 p.m. And first up, I will invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, this is
Okay, it looks like maybe we're having a little glitch on Zoom.
says I'm not the host, but I am.
Okay,
It's my account.
all right. We're going to take one quick pause while we try to get that organized. Did you send it to me? Do you want me to look up mine?
I just took it off the agenda, but it's saying I'm not the host, even though I am. Here we go.
Okay,
Sorry.
no worries. Okay. All right, first on the agenda, we have our opportunity for citizens' comments. Do we have anybody in Zoom? Before I give the whole spiel about the citizens' comments, I will let you all know that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on HWCam. As always, we do offer citizens the opportunity to speak. Not sure that we have anyone who looks like they want to speak tonight, but I'm going to give the opportunity, and if there is anyone in the room who has a comment to offer, I'll give you a chance and you can approach the podium. Okay. And Mr. Tracy, do we have anyone who's in Zoom?
We do not.
Okay. At this point, we will close the Zoom link since there's nobody there. It's the first time that's happened in a really long time. Okay. Next up, David Frankel, will you do me a favor? Would you grab what I had asked David Polito to read, and would you be willing to jump right in and read that on a review of our school committee protocols?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Take this on here.
Thank you for jumping in.
As elected members of the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School Committee, we, including the superintendent, accept the high honour and trust that has been placed in us to ensure that students of the district receive the best education possible. To that end, we hereby commit to the following in the conduct of our business. Administration will endeavour to make materials for school committee meetings available the Friday before the meeting. The school committee will recognise that some circumstances will not always make this possible. In any event, we recognise that having background materials available for school committee members is a best practice.
Thank you. And I appreciate your willingness to do that unprompted, without any warning. Speaking of without any warning, we have also been reviewing our school committee mission statement, and I'm hoping that Anna will be willing to read a portion of that now.
No,
Okay, pass it along.
of course. The Hamilton-Wenham Regional School Committee will lead and inspire a district that supports and guides the superintendent to execute and achieve the approved 2022-2023 district goals.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Next up on our agenda is our student representative report. And I'd like to welcome Julia Sappas.
Can everyone hear me? Okay.
You have to talk right in the mic,
You
though.
do have to talk right into it, yeah.
All right, it's nice to be with everyone tonight. My name is Julie Sappas. I'm the junior class president for the high school. And I'm going to be giving the student activities presentation tonight. All right, so first up for the high school, the biggest thing happening is our Spirit Week. So that's run by the student government. And we kick that off today. And we have our homecoming dance tomorrow, which is run by the seniors, and everyone's always really excited for that. And then the toy drive, it's part of Spirit Week, and it supports Shriners and local families, so that will run until November 21st. And then we'll have a Stuff the Cruiser event where students relay the toys into the police cruiser, which is always fun. These are a couple pictures from our hallway decorating, and then the one on the right is the sport that was today. So for clubs and sports, DECA, which is our business club, we have a district competition in December. Environmental and social justice, there was a thrift event held, which helps combat fast fashion, and then also the money contributes to different charities for sustainable fashion, and that was a success. Our science team had an in-person meet at North Andover High School, and we got 3rd place for Pictionary. And then Model UN, we have a St. John's Prep in-person conference on December 10th, which is exciting because we haven't been able to have that in person for a while. And then that's a picture from the science team. And for sports, our winter sports meeting was held yesterday for more information about the winter season. For the middle school, December 20th, it's a little far off, but that's the winter concert. The middle school cooking club has been a big success. There were 5 November meetings with a full wait list, so it's very popular, and that's a picture from that. And then the 7th grade collaboratory project was a big event for them. 7th grade geography students completed a project on consumption using materials in the collaboratory. And the 6th grade award ceremony to close quarter 1 was also recently held. For Winthrop, a couple things. There's a book fair on December 1st and 2nd, which is usually a big event. And then hosting the annual Holiday Boutique on December 3rd, which is also usually a big event. And for Cutler, there is a ski, board, and skate sale that's happening. It's sponsored by the Friends of Cutler, and that will be held on Saturday and Sunday, and it's a huge fundraiser for the school. And some proceeds will also be donated to the ski team to help fund participation for families who have trouble. And finally, for Bucher School, they just had a book fair. It was November 16th and today, and they sold $6,800 worth of books. So a huge success and lots of reading to be happening. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. Does anybody have any questions? No? So I'm sure they're telling you don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting, though you are, of course, invited to,
You're very
but
welcome to
it
stay,
is, we understand you might have other things. I just wanted to say I was excited to learn, I didn't know that we had a cooking club, I think, at the
Oh, yeah.
middle school, so that was good to learn.
Sadsit runs it.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
All right.
So, you got homework to do.
Yeah, feel free to sneak out anytime.
Or you could stay, because it's
You are
riveting.
very welcome to stay. It is very exciting.
Okay, next up is the consent agenda. Do we have anyone who would like to place a hold on any of the items on the consent agenda? Okay, I will take a motion.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee accept the consent agenda as written, or approve the consent agenda as written.
Do we have a second? No, they're going to go right now.
Yeah, they're coming.
Oh.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, there is no discussion. Julia, can you hear us?
Yep.
Okay. All right, all those in favor? Oh, we have to do a roll call because we have a remote member.
Sorry.
That's okay. I actually forgot to introduce you to let everyone know we do have one remote member today, which is Julia Campbell. Okay, so that being said, we'll go roll call vote. Julia?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Dana's a yes. Anna?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
David? David?
Yes.
All right, and it is it is unanimous, and the motion passes. Okay. So next up, if you are looking at the agenda, the next item is, under new business, is the auto charging station grant. I am going to ask that, or I guess Mr. Tracy's going to speak, that I think we're going to need to table this motion.
Yeah, I'm going to request
or
to table this at this time. The grant was written specifically by the town of Hamilton. And when the specs were done, they were done for Bucher School as well, which is not in Hamilton. So we need to just go back to the agency that gave us the grant and reword the grant so that everybody knows where the money's actually going. So we will request to take that off, and we will bring it into a future meeting.
Okay.
Great.
All right. And that means, DECA, if you guys are ready, we look forward to hearing the presentation.
I'm sure I can do it. All right, so hi, I'm Sophie Bassam. I'm representing DECA today with my sister Eliza Bassam, my fellow officer Phoebe Ting, and my other fellow officer Hannah Cirillo. So we are all directors. There are 4 of us at the head of DECA, and then we have 8 officers who we lead to kind of delegate some tasks below us, who are, as you can see, kind of a little bit like middle of the screen there, Allie Benshoff, Allie Chan, Marissa Conway, Nina Finn, Lily Glass, Mina Gorley, Caleb Leonard, and Drew Stewart. And this year, another fun thing that we're kind of adding in is kind of like Harry Potter-esque. We're doing houses to add some competition for DECA to encourage membership participation, because as you'll see later in the presentation, we have a lot of members this year. So we want to encourage everyone to get involved. So my house is capybaras. We just kind of chose animals that we liked. Eliza has penguins, Hannah has leopards, and Phoebe has otters. So we're promoting that for competition to get points. And we're also, for the first time, going to host a Spirit Week, but you'll hear about that in a minute.
So, my name is Phoebe Ting. DECA is a business club that is devoted to developing transferable skills for colleges and careers. DECA is more formally known as Distributive Education Clubs of America, but is more well known between the students as just DECA. DECA is a huge club that is worldwide. They have over 200,000 students in places all over, in all of the 50 states, 4 of the territories, and a bunch of other countries outside of the U.S.
So just to sum up what we're doing in our DECA chapter this year, as Sophie mentioned earlier, we have 218 members this year, the most we have ever had in my 4 years here at least. We have a huge focus on in-person events since COVID is coming, well, in the school, it's coming to a close. And we are trying to promote more community-based activities that will bring us together, and not only just DECA, but also the school. So as Sophie mentioned earlier, we're having house-based engagement competitions. In addition, we're having the stock market game again, which got several students to internationals last year, and the virtual business challenge was up and running. The statewide quiz bowl competition is coming up, and we're hoping to get a team together, maybe this team right here. We have some active fundraisers. So Riley Rocks was on Wednesday. It was in support of Beverly DECA's charity, and we had a huge success from that. It was to wear PJs and just give $1 in exchange to show your support. And then Turkey Grams is currently happening. It's to show students thankfulness to others and give candy to friends. So that's currently being sold during lunches. Then we have the general store like usual, which is teaching students how to work in retail and how to run a store and create clothing that they find appealing and will also advertise to others. And finally, we have the speaker series, and the Hamilton Wenham's Got Talent will run in the spring.
So DECA has 3 main competitions, one that takes place in December, and that's our district competition that happens at the Doubletree in Danvers. And then in March, we head down to states, which happens in Boston. And this year, ICDC is being held in Orlando, Florida. Now with competition, students choose to kind of go in 2 different directions. One direction is the typical role play, which Phoebe will talk about later, and the other one is written projects. And written projects are either a presentation or a paper that gets our DECA members into the real world, connecting with businesses around here or businesses they find interesting, and doing one-on-one calls with them, emailing them, and just doing a lot of research on their business.
So this is just an example of a role play that a student may receive at competition. As you can see at the top, there's performance indicators, which are just touch points that the student has to hit upon in their presentation to the judge. And then the event situation is just a real world scenario put into context of the competition. The students will have limited amount of time, depending on what kind of competition they're in, to read the role play and then create a solution to the problem presented in the scenario. After that given time is up, they have to present to a judge, so it kind of develops your skills for not only problem solving, but also quick thinking and kind of evaluative thinking as well. The majority of people who compete in DECA are in this role play category. As Eliza said, we have 218 members this year, and right around 200 members are in role plays.
So here are some photos just to give you examples of what a speaker series may look like on the top left. On the bottom right is a photo of the DECA store. As you can see, it's right in the lobby, so a lot of students have access to it, and we're also trying to make it more accessible to parents across the district. And bottom left is the flyer we have for Turkey Grams, which we are again selling at lunch, 1 for 1 and 6 for 5.
All right, so just to kind of like review what we said. So DECA, the main purpose is to help students build transferable business skills that they can use in the real world beyond high school. Build self-esteem, kind of like Phoebe said, it develops critical thinking in role plays and thinking on your feet, and communication, experiencing leadership, like presenting at meetings like this, and practicing community service, like our interaction with Riley Rocks and just trying to support communities around us that we can, and we can do that through this club with our outreach with our 218 members this year. So we found that students really join because they want to be ready for both college and future jobs, because we're all going to have a job. So it's good to build skills that we can actually use. We have our Twitter and Instagram linked below. Our Instagram's a bit more active if you're trying to follow us. And I personally joined DECA because I really wanted to get better at public speaking and communicating. And I also was very interested in how a business situation would really work. So I've stayed in role plays for all my 4 years of doing DECA. And I've found a lot of success. I've grown a lot, I found, in competition, and also just as a person running the club outside of competition. And it's been a really good experience for me.
Adding on to that, role plays, I initially went into it really nervous, didn't even know how to shake a hand properly, and thanks to Mrs. Wheeler, along with our DECA judges, that at competition, I've learned how to interact in a business professional environment, along with also learning what is a professional attire, because a lot of kids don't know that. In addition to that, as Sophie mentioned, we're all gonna have a job someday. DECA actually helped me find a finance internship last year, so it actually gave me a real life job, in addition to teaching me how to hold it down and nail the interview. DECA has given me the ability to lead others in such a large number. It was impossible at first for me to comprehend how to get everyone involved, but as Mrs. Wheeler and the rest of the club has shown me, it's possible as long as you all make it work together, and the community-based events have really given us that ability, along with the competition, which we all go into really nervous and excited, and then we celebrate for each other during the award ceremonies.
That's our presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
So
Thank you so much for that presentation. It's so, it's really important for us to see the work, and especially from a club that is, like you said, so popular is the wrong word, but so influential, I guess, and highly attended at the school. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for our DECA presenters? Anna?
I have a question. You can't come here and do this awesome presentation and just get out without any questions. I'm actually really intrigued by how big the club is. My back of mind math says that's more than half the school, right? So,
Just under.
okay, I mean, not to minimize us, but
48%.
so are there any other clubs that are anywhere near that large? I didn't think so. What do you attribute this great popularity? I don't think that's a bad word. Like, what is it about DECA that is drawing so many kids in? Because to be honest, like, business development is not the most exciting thing for a lot of people once you get older, but obviously you guys have something really good going. What's your special magic sauce here?
Well, I think that it's partially because Ms. Wheeler has built such a big foundation for this club. So when I came into the high school 4 years ago, like, we can't take all the credit for growing it that big, because I remember being a freshman and all of my mentors who were seniors and juniors just told me, like, oh, well, you have to join DECA. Like, everybody does DECA. So I think we definitely have that foundation, but I think it's also the intrigue of, yes, being able to develop skills, which I understand isn't that exciting, but it's also because it's kind of whatever you make it. So we have a minimum of 3 meetings to attend, which if you do competition, like, you already meet that requirement. But there's also so much more that you can do. Like, right now we're running Turkeygrams. We just closed that out, the Riley Rocks thing the other day. We have a bunch more that we're planning, like the talent show and everything. There's a lot of engagement that you can have, but it's kind of a choice about how much you want to be involved in the club. So I think it's intriguing because you can have a role and learn skills without it being too much of your time.
Just to add on to that, another big thing for when I came into high school was the community. I was very nervous to make new friends, and especially with all the clubs available, it's hard to choose one or the other. So because of the size that it already was when I came into the school, I found that all my friends were doing it so great. There's a perfect club that I can hang out with my friends in. But then in addition to that, this year, I mean, we've worked on communication a lot over the past few years, but this year especially, we've made group chats, we've increased our social media, and we made it feel more like a community, offering more events that make it possible for everyone to participate without feeling as though they're left out. And I think this community appeals to all the new freshmen as they come in, because they just want to feel part of a group, and this is the perfect group for them.
I just want to piggyback off of what both Eliza and Sophie said. I think definitely the community aspect comes from Miss Wheeler and Miss Rogal, because even though, like, as a freshman you, like, might hear their name but, like, not see them, the first time you'll meet with Miss Wheeler, you'll be greeted with, like, a very nice and, like, welcoming and, like, warm, like, just introduction, which already is very nice. And then what Sophie said, a lot of people just, like, hear of DECA and then we're like, oh yeah, I might as well sign up. And when they go to meet with Miss Wheeler is very understanding. She says, I know you don't know how this works, but, like, we'll teach you. And that's where the, like, building it yourself kind of comes in, because after your first competition, you kind of, like, get the feel of how it works, and then you can either stick with the role play for all your years, or you can make it whatever you want and do a project where you can go into the community and partner with things. So I think a lot of the appeal for DECA is just based off of, it's a club that you can create a basis of and then build off of that, and then also just the general community sense.
One thing that no one really touched on is I think DECA, besides it just being, like, spread by word of mouth, it's, like, I feel like the one club or just, like, activity at the school that it doesn't really matter what, like, what group you might feel part of, whether, like, you lean more towards sports or you lean more towards theater, or, like, you're going to be in the science club because you're, like, doing sciences. Like, DECA, the amount of categories that you can go into is such, like, a wide spread, like, collection of them that, like, anyone can find something for them in it. Like, it's not just, I feel like we kind of group it as just, like, business, but, like, that business takes you in so many different directions that everyone feels like they can be part of it.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, as you were talking about all the opportunities and just what you've affirmed here, a lot of clubs are sort of one-dimensional, right? Like, there's a club that has a topic and it's sort of monotone, but DECA strikes me as more orchestral, right? There's a lot of opportunity for people to do different things without being niched or sort of pigeonholed in a way. I have to think that has something to do with its appeal, because if you're really into marketing, there's a lot of marketing. But if you're really into finance, you could take it a much more kind of serious, spreadsheet direction. And not a lot of clubs have that versatility. So, and obviously Miss Wheeler is just like the best ever. So it's nice to give praise. Do you also think the fact that you have the opportunity for travel and competition and, it's part of you're outside your bubble, do you think that's part of the appeal?
Yeah, just to go off what you said for the versatility of it, it's even beyond just finance and marketing. Like, even within just marketing, we have like sports marketing and retail marketing. Like, there's so many small niches that you can find just within competition. And that's not even to speak of all the other activities that we run as DECA, that everybody has their place. And for traveling, that definitely adds incentive, I would say, especially since this year we have Orlando, Florida, which was a big hit when we did it last time, and is located right next to Disney World, which I'm sure doesn't hurt with people wanting to participate. And that also kind of adds incentive to do better in competition. But it definitely is that it's traveling. And I have a lot of friends that I met at districts and states last year who I still talk to now, just because there's a lot of time that you spend waiting with other people who share similar interests to you because they have similar categories and also obviously love DECA. So I think that the combination of being able to travel and also meeting people that are so similar to you but from different towns that you never would have been able to meet otherwise also adds a lot to it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. I thank you very much. I appreciate you coming. I wanted, this is not a question, it's just something I wrote down as all of you spoke. I wrote down, and on my paper here, a sense of belonging. And that's such an important thing. And I just, that was the embodiment of what you all described as a club that really has a place for everyone. That was beautiful, in my opinion. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Mr. Tracy?
Just one final thing. I think I want to publicly acknowledge Ms. Wheeler. Back in 2016, I think, she was hired. I was principal of the high school. She was hired at the high school part-time. And, our conversation centered all around DECA. We're going to get DECA going. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. I was like, this is going to be great, And here we are, 6 or 7 years later, and, almost half of the kids in the building are involved, and it's come far in a very short amount of time. So congratulations and thank you.
Right. Thank you.
I was going to say you and your orchestra.
Okay.
All right.
You don't want to pull any
All right.
strings.
Just going to switch to the...
Yep. All right. I'm going to let Vinny get us all set up. Oh, we did it.
Already did.
We pass it.
Yep.
They're all set.
Yep.
They're all set.
Yeah, no. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep doing whatever it is you're doing with those kids.
Seriously. Hold up there.
Some of it has to be that sweet blazer.
I thought you were gonna say
I restrain myself.
Where are your purple shirts?
In the laundry. Honestly.
Oh, yeah. No purple Thursday?
it's complimentary color.
Oh, you're not feeling it, huh?
Laser.
Oh.
Happens.
Oh, okay, sweet. Awesome. Thank you very much. Sure.
Okay.
Frank Soretti from our auditing firm, Powers & Sullivan, here to present our fiscal year FY22 audit report.
Thank you, Vinny.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask you to maybe tip the microphone a little up towards you, and I will ask, maybe HW Cam, I don't know if there's any way to turn up the podium mic a little bit. Okay.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to present the results of the district's 2022 audit. I'd like to start off by thanking the superintendent, the finance director, the treasurer, and the rest of the finance team for all the cooperation and assistance that we received during the course of the audit, as we normally do. I'm always very impressed that the district is ready to have us come in so early after year end. We were here the last week of July And it really is impressive. I have other clients that, we're just starting their audits now, and they're not really ready. They're still, booking entries and still trying to get things together. And so it is a major accomplishment, and I just wanted to mention that. I actually kind of use Hamilton Wenham as the model when I talk to other clients that, hey, I have a client that's ready in July to have their audit done, and they've got their reports into the state and everything is done timely, and they're just like, wow, I really want to get to that point. And so it really is a major accomplishment, so I wanted to mention that. And before I get into the presentation, I just wanted to go over a couple of required communications. The first one is just related to significant accounting policies, and calling out that those are noted in Note 1 of the financial statements. And there were no new accounting policies adopted, and the application of existing accounting policies was not changed during the year. Accounting estimates are an integral part of the financial statements. The most significant estimates in the financial statements are the net OPEB liability, the net pension liability, the compensated absences liability, and the depreciation on fixed assets. We evaluated the key factors and assumptions that go into those estimates, and we found them to be reasonable in relation to the financial statements taken as a whole. We did not encounter any difficulties with management while performing the audit. I'm very happy to report that, and we haven't in the past either, so there was nothing unusual there. We didn't have to propose any adjustments to correct any balances on the ledgers. We found the ledger balances to be correct and accurate. We did not have any disagreements with management regarding any accounting matters or that could impact the financial statements. So it was a very smooth audit from our standpoint. Guess my remote's not working, so let me try the keys. So the principal objective of our work is the expression of an opinion on the financial statements. We perform the audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America and government auditing standards issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. We're responsible for planning and performing the audit to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement and fairly presented in accordance with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. And management is also responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements. As part of conducting the audit, we meet with district staff to understand how they process transactions and to identify and test the related internal controls. We tested the amounts and disclosures reported in the financial statements and assisted with drafting the financial statements. Based on our audit, we were able to issue an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That's a clean opinion. It's the best you can get. It means the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The information that we received was accurate. See if I can get this under control, Benny. I'm not sure what I did because I don't see that on my screen. Sorry.
Might be extending his screen instead of mirroring his screen.
I apologize for that.
It's okay. National Take a Hike Day could be.
It's a little late in the day for that.
Ah, okay. That would be a little better. All of our interactions were professional and courteous. Budgetary results indicate a sound budget process and strong budgetary controls are in place. So those are the results that we had for the audit. Next couple slides talk about management's responsibilities and then the auditor's responsibilities. I'll let you read those on your own. Next slide talks about general fund balance, and the fund balance totaled $8.2 million at the end of the year. $553,000 of that was assigned for encumbrances. Another 3.1 of excess and deficiency was assigned for the subsequent year's budget, and that left you with unassigned fund balance of $4.5 million.
and that's very consistent with what the prior year balance was, which was $4.4 million. Operations on a budgetary basis resulted in a $5.3 million increase in fund balance, and that was mainly due to revenues coming in over budget by $302,000, and then that was related to Medicaid reimbursements and Chapter 70 state aid. Your expenditures also came in about $3 million under budget, and the main line items there were instructional services for $1.6 million, programs with other districts for $459,000, employee benefits for $404,000, and district administration for $304,000. And another $2.1 million of the increase related to a change on the budget to actual schedule and how the teacher summer salaries were accounted for. In the past years, they had been accrued, and in 2022, they were encumbered to be more in line with how you record them on your books. And it makes the reconciliation process a lot more streamlined, and it makes the financial statements more in line with how you're recording those on your ledgers. And it doesn't affect your unassigned fund balance, which is really where your E&D is based off of, which we'll get to in a minute. Speaking of E&D, or excess and deficiency, it's subject to Department of Revenue review and approval, can be appropriated by the school committee for any valid school purpose. The E&D is estimated to be about $4.4 million this year, which is up slightly from the prior year, which was 4.2. The statutes allow the district to maintain a balance not to exceed 5% of the subsequent year's budget, and then any excess over that is required to be returned to the member towns. The school district has also put its own limit in place of 3%, and the estimated E&D is expected to be $2.3 million over the 5% DOR limit and $3.2 million over the school's 3% limit. The net OPEB liability, was $39.3 million. That was a $16.6 million decrease from the prior year. The main reason for the decrease, the main reasons were the discount rate increasing from 2.25%, discount rate increased from 2.25%, decreasing the liability by $28 million. The increase in the discount rate is basically a function of what the 20-year AA municipal bond rate is doing, and as interest rates are going up, so is that rate, and that's factored into your discount rate. And that a 1% change in the discount rate, I think, has about a $3 or $4 million impact on your liability, so it has a big impact. The methodology for calculating expected claims was updated. That increased the liability by $8.1 million, and the model for projecting future healthcare costs was also updated, increasing the liability by $6.6 million. And then this is probably my favorite slide this year. This slide is talking about the fact that you established an OPEB trust fund in fiscal '22. That's a major accomplishment, and you're now on the road to starting to fund your OPEB liability. You made your first contribution to the OPEB trust. It totaled $100,000, and you earned a small amount of income on that during the year. Returns were not as good in '22 as they had been in the last couple of years, and probably not going to be great for the next couple. Hopefully things get better soon. But you ended the year with $100,058 in the fund. But it is great that you set that up, and you've now started funding that liability. The current valuation that you have is dated July 1, 21. That's good for the fiscal 2022 and 23 audits. And then you're going to need a new full valuation for the fiscal 2024 audit. The net pension liability, there's basically two pension systems that school employees can join. Teachers and certain administrators are eligible to be in the Mass Teachers Retirement System. The liability for their pensions is fully paid by the state. The liability associated with the district is $48.1 million that the state has assumed, and they paid $3.9 million in 2022 for Hamilton Wenham pensions. And then for those that are not eligible for MTRS, if they qualify, they can join the Essex Regional Retirement System. The district's liability associated with Essex Regional was $9 million, and that was down $1.8 million from the prior year. The main reason for the decrease there is that there was a 20% return on the retirement system's assets, and that's on a 12/31 year end, so that was as of 12/31/21. So going into 12/31/22, it's not going to look so good. But they went from being, they were 67% funded, which was a 7% increase in the funding level of the Essex retirement system. That takes us to the single audit. The single audit is one of the other 3 reports that you should have, and that's for the audits of federal awards, and for entities that expend more than $750,000 in a fiscal year are required to have an audit of their federal awards. The district expended $2 million, and that was up from the prior year, which was $1.3 million. And there's a lot of ARPA money and COVID money out there right now that is contributing to that increase. Expenditures were $758,000 for the school lunch program, which was a fully free program again for 2022. $574,000 for the special education program, $695,000 for other education grants. The results of that audit were that we were able to issue an unmodified opinion on compliance, which is another clean opinion, best you can get. We didn't have any question costs, and there was a prior year finding related to not having documented policies and procedures that was resolved in 2022. So that is great to see that that was taken care of. Management letter, there were, well, it's important to note about the management letter is that there's no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that are reported. The comments that are in here are things that we consider to be improvements or enhancements to your internal controls, but nothing that you really need to be concerned about. The first comment here relates to the cash and investment policy, and there was just a discrepancy between what the policy said and how the funds were being maintained. And I know that that's something that you've been discussing, and that my understanding is that you're looking to update the policy to try to clarify that language so that this is not an issue going forward. And then the last comment was one that had been made a couple of years back, and it was just about centralizing the procurement information and trying to get that information into the accounting system that it would be, so that it would be readily available to those that needed to review it as part of the approval process of the procurement. And that was done in 2022, so we consider that to be fully resolved. And that is everything.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, questions? Anna?
Thank you very much for all of that. I have sort of a, I guess, a point of information or order. The presentation that we have linked to our agenda is not the same as what you have. And in some cases, there's a direct change from increase to decrease in some crucial areas. Am I right in thinking that you modified it after this was sent to us?
I did, yeah. I actually did that tonight.
Okay.
I was going over it, getting ready for the meeting, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't update some of these things correctly. And so I mentioned it to Vinny before the meeting, and I said that I would be happy to send over the updated copy to you guys. So I'll do that first thing in the morning, so you have the up-to-date one.
No, I think that'll be important for our minutes as well.
Yeah.
There's one question I want to ask you, and a little bit ask Vinny too. It's on slide 12 of the linked agenda, which talks about updating the cash and investment policy, and we at the policy subcommittee level have been talking about that. Vinny, am I right in thinking that this is one of those D-section policy questions that had remained opened?
Correct.
That you needed to talk to Frank about before we could resolve? Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Right. Well, we are actively talking about that, and we have our next policy subcommittee meeting, and we'll hope to be addressing that cash investment question. So thank you for continuing to bring it on there, but we are actually really working on that. So
Great.
Okay, other questions? Julia? No? Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your work. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
All right.
Am I okay to just
Yeah,
pull
you can
that
just-
out, or?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank Vinny for your work. That was some kind words we got to hear about
Great
the work that
report.
you're doing. Thank you. All right. Next up, I don't know if you guys need a second to get
Yeah, just
Yep,
1 minute,
okay.
just to fix this.
All right, next up, we will have the superintendent's initial recommendation for fiscal year '24 on the budget. Are you okay?
A really long time ago. Maybe she forgot, like, thought she did it then.
For some reason, it takes a second.
Probably.
Which looks weird. See how it looks funny? What is going on?
Okay, so tonight we are here to present to you the superintendent's initial FY24 budget recommendation as it stands today on November 17th. So I just want to start off with explaining what a budget is. By definition, a budget is an estimate of your income and expenditures for a set period of time. So for us, it's a fiscal year based on July 1st to June 30th. But it's really more than just that. A budget kind of explains the district goals for the year. It sets our priorities and really presents to the community what our goals are and what we're going to focus on for the next year. So it really is more than just a spreadsheet of all of our income and expenses. So what do we look at when we build our budget? The big things we go to look at is our collective bargaining agreements between our 3 unions, as well as all of our individual administrative contract agreements for most of our administrative staff. Through these 2 documents, they show us our COLA adjustments, all of our step increases, specifically for our teachers, TAs, and office staff. In addition, we look there for all of our column changes. These main 3 things are what are derived from our collective bargaining agreements. Next, while we build the budget, we look at our retirements. So when people retire, they retire at a higher step and scale, and we recognize savings through each individual retirement application that's submitted before December 1st. Next, we incorporate all of our staff turnovers throughout the district. So we look at who was here while we built the FY23 budget and who turned over and incorporated into our FY24 budget. The next big ticket item is around our health insurance enrollment changes and premium rate increases. Our total health insurance costs for FY24 account for about $3.8 million, which is just under 10% of our overall budget. So any major changes in health insurance could have a big impact on our overall budget. For this fiscal year, another big ticket item we looked at was our transportation costs. As everyone knows, gas prices have been going crazy, and it has been difficult for our bus company to hire bus drivers to drive the buses, so it's driving up a lot of our transportation costs. In addition, like every year, we have to look at our out-of-district tuition costs. In total, that accounts for about $4.5 million, or just under 11% of our overall budget. And as we mentioned to you in the last school committee meeting, OSD increased the tuition rates by 14% next year, so you can see how this would have a huge impact on our budget. And lastly, we try to incorporate as best we can any requests by our building principals or department heads and look at the conditions of our buildings and grounds and try to work in any budget flexibility we have to improve these facilities. But where do we start? So the very first thing we start with is our enrollment shift. So we look at our regional agreement for this. In our regional agreement, it states that to come up with the assessment, we look at the prior 3-year average as it stands on October 1st, and come up with that 3-year average to apply the new assessment during the fiscal year. So on this slide, I've presented to you what happened in Hamilton between October 1st, 2021 and October 1st, 2022, broken down by grade level and by school. So in total, on October 1st, 2022, Hamilton had enrolled 1,064 students, which is down roughly 14 students year over year. Here I've presented the same data, but for Wenham on October 1st, 2022, Wenham had enrolled 539 students, which is down 13 students compared to the same time in 2021. 3 students, sorry. This slide combines both Hamilton and Wenham. So in total, on October 1st, 2022, through both towns, we had 1,603 resident enrolled students, and combined that is a reduction of approximately 17 students from the prior year. But that isn't all our students. That's just how we base the assessment and how we build the towns. There are an additional 92 students, I believe. They're represented in kind of these columns over off to the right. There are tuition-in students for pre-K, as well as our school choice students from other member communities around us. In total, we saw a reduction of approximately 29 students year over year, which is a drop of roughly 1.6% of our student population over that 1-year period. So what are the consequences of this enrollment shift? So we take our new data from October 1st, 2022, and we remove our old data from October 1st, 2019. That's how we come up with our new average. Our prior 3-year average, which is represented in the middle of the slide, came out to be 65.4% for Hamilton and 34.6% from Wenham. But the new shift, after we incorporate the new residential enrollment, is broken down as 66.23% Hamilton and 33.77% Wenham, which is a change of roughly 0.83%. But what does that mean when it translates into dollars? So what I tried to represent here, if you look at the bottom, is what is our 23 current assessment? And if you were to just roll the books from June 30 to July 1, we don't change any revenues, we don't change any expenses. All that changes is that enrollment shift. It would mean $281,000 leaving Wenham and going towards Hamilton. So when you look through this presentation, especially at the end, where you see the percentage increases for both towns, you can attribute $281,000 of that increase or decrease directly to the enrollment shift. So just looking at that alone, it would mean a 1.2% increase for Hamilton and a 2.4% decrease to Wenham. So I tried to break down kind of a 3-step process on how I build the budget. This is the first step, our enrollment shift. So it's the same data you saw on before, but I'm going to build upon it throughout the presentation. You can just see again that it's the same percentage increase and decrease for both towns. The next step in the budget process is looking at our offsets and revenues. When you look at the budget book, this is broken out in 2 different sections, but for this presentation, I added all the revenue sources and offsets into one, so you could easily see it on one slide. I'm going to briefly go through a couple of them, but for now and for any point in the presentation, if I don't talk about something, feel free to ask a question right in the middle of it if you'd like to know the answer. But just starting in order, as you can see from our previous slide, our school choice enrollment dropped 4 students. On average, we receive $5,000 per student from the exiting community, so I have reduced our school choice offset by approximately $20,000. The next item to change is our ESSER grants. At the end of this fiscal year, FY23, our ESSER grant will be dried up. ESSER grants will be dried up and will not be available for use in FY24. So I have zeroed out this line, which represents a reduction of approximately $147,000. The next big ticket item is our circuit breaker offset. Circuit breaker offset is a reimbursement for prior year special education costs for students that cost above the foundation amount. So as our special ed costs increase, so do our circuit breaker reimbursements. This number will change between now and the final budget, but my estimate now is that we will see a pretty substantial increase of 11%, which represents about another $118,000. The next item is our Regional Transportation Reimbursement Fund. One thing I want to point out is if you go 2 lines down, you see our state transportation reimbursement has been zeroed out. So I had mentioned this in my FY22 year-ending presentation. At the end of FY22, we finally hit the cap on how much funds we can have on reserve in our transportation revolving account. Therefore, it moves from a general fund revenue source up into the offset category. So I've zeroed out the portion of it in the general fund revenues and are now recording it as a revolving offset. In addition to that separation now, I am still anticipating that we're going to receive about an additional $40,000. This is another item that will probably be updated and will probably be increased before the final budget's over, once we receive more solid numbers from the state and what's contained in their budget. Next is a modest increase in Chapter 70. For here, our practice is just to set it equal to what we received in the year before. So that represents an increase of approximately $49,000. Next is around Medicaid. As you saw Frank present earlier, we did receive revenues in excess of our budget around Medicaid, so we are carrying that estimate forward into FY24, which represents an increase of approximately $50,000. Also, as Frank said, our excess and deficiency has increased modestly, and it has increased by approximately $72,000. So rolling all these revenues and offsets together, it means additional offsets and revenues of approximately $165,000. So there you plug that number in and you come up with our adjusted assessment. So here's our step 1 and step 2 process. If we applied both these things and no changes to our expenses, it would result in an increase to Hamilton of 0.77%, and a decrease to Wenham of approximately 2.88%, and an overall reduction of 0.5%. But the next thing is our biggest thing, obviously, is our expenses. So as you know, our expenses have 2 sides, our operating budget and our debt service budget. This is what our initial budget recommendation is for our operating budget, broken down in DESI category. Right now, our initial budget is reflecting an increase of approximately $1.7 million, or 4.16%. Again, the other side of our expenses is our debt service. Here on the left side, I've broken out what our principal payment and interest is and what the change year over year. The big ticket item that is increasing this is it's cut off right there, is the Cutler feasibility study. This will be the first pay down at the end of FY24 related to that project that was approved at the October town meeting. Combined with the principal and interest, we're estimating a payment of roughly $245,000. That represents a substantial portion of the $270,000 that's being increased. That is broken out into an increase of roughly $183,000 for Hamilton and $86,000 for Wenham. So adding in step 3 of the process of changing our expenses, it ultimately results in a final assessment to Hamilton of 6.89% and a final assessment to Wenham of 3.02%, and an overall increase of approximately 5.5. So right now, we're going to take a deeper look into our expenses, where I've broken them out by school, by location, and by DESI category, because that's what we're required to vote on. So I'm going to stop for a second. Throughout this presentation, a lot of things are repetitive in each slide. I'm not going to talk about every single one of them. I'm really only going to point out the big ticket items. But again, if you have questions on any of them that I didn't respond to, please let me know. For the Bucher slide, I am going to go a little bit more in depth on some of these things to explain how I came up with them. But in the later slides, I will probably just repeat the number and not the entire process. So again, just to pick out the big ones, our teachers DESI category, which, just to remind you, this isn't every teacher. Teachers are spread out through every DESI category. They just have their one signal for a specific type of teacher. So in the DESI's teacher category at the Bucher Elementary School, we're seeing an overall increase of approximately $48,000. Normally, the very first item here, staff turnover, that's when I said before, individual that we budgeted for in FY23 ended up leaving, retiring, or being terminated, and we replaced them most of the time with a less expensive teacher, whether they're lower in columns, they have less of a degree, or whether they have less years of experience. In some cases, though, the exact opposite happens. Throughout this presentation, most of the staff turnovers are negative, but there are a few that are positive. Bucher is one of them. So at Bucher, the staff member that left, the one we replaced them with, was actually more experienced and higher on the pay scale, which resulted in an increased cost. But again, if you look up here, it's negative, as with most of the staff turnovers. Again, with retirements, it works the same way. As long as someone gives us their retirement notice by December 1st, we incorporate a reduced salary for the individual that's replacing them. At the Bucher Elementary School, we're realizing a savings of roughly $40,000. The next item is around an increase of approximately 0.3 FTEs for our specialists. You'll see this repeated at each of the 3 elementary schools. So at the elementary level, our specialists are the art, gym, and music. So at each of the 3 elementary schools, we have 1 full-time person and 1 part-time 0.7 individual. So the principals have requested to increase the 0.7 part-time individual to a 1.0. So you'll see at each of the 3 elementary schools, we've given 0.3 FTEs for each one of them representing music, 1 representing gym, 1 representing art. So for Bucher, that means an increase of approximately $21,000 or 0.3 FTEs. Again, throughout the presentation, you'll see that I've broken out between STEPS and COLA. For the STEPS, it's approximately $31,000, and the COLA, it's approximately $22,000. The next item that you'll see throughout the presentation is our longevity calculation. Just to give you background on this, we have a new, we're in the 2nd year of the new teacher's contract. Prior to that, we didn't have longevity. We had senior status. Senior status, the value of it was based on your years of experience. However, you had to fill out paperwork and you had to submit a project plan. So it wasn't a guaranteed payment, whereas longevity is a guaranteed payment. So prior to this year, we didn't know exactly who was going to apply for senior status. So what we did to budget for it is we looked at the district as a whole and said, what did we spend in the prior year? Just to round numbers, we said, okay, for senior status, we're spending approximately $70,000 this year. Let's spread that out amongst the 5 schools. So we put $10,000 at Bucher, $10,000 at Cutler, $10,000 at Winthrop. We increased it a little bit for Miles River at $15,000, and then again at the high school because they have more staff members. But now that it's a guaranteed longevity payment, I can link how much each individual is getting based on their years of service. So now I know the exact number, and we no longer have to estimate. So for Bucher, in just this one category, I was able to remove $10,000 worth of maybe senior status payments and replace it with a guaranteed $4,000 of longevity, which resulted in a savings of $5,000. So you'll see that repeated throughout the whole entire presentation. Even if you just look at the other teaching services, it's also right there. That was the opposite effect. The only reason for that is we put the whole entire 10,000 in the teacher's DESI category. We didn't break it up into every single DESI category. That's why some will be negative and some will be positive. If you take all of them throughout the whole presentation, it represents a savings of about $15,000, the new longevity calculation. So I gave you the long version on Bucher. I'll try to make it quick for the rest of them. So just to briefly hit on one of the other big ones, other teaching services. Overall, it's only an increase of about $8,000, which is mainly contributed to savings of $5,000 for the staff turnover, which is being offset by an increase in our steps and COLA. Continuing with Bucher, one big ticket item here is our operations and maintenance. So overall, I'm going to go back one slide. Overall, Bucher is seeing an increase of approximately $202,000, but you can see here, $126,000 of it is related to one item we have on here. So much like we did last year with our E&D, we have included one-time E&D offsets, of which one of them is to redo the auditorium and entryway at Bucher. As you know, we're in with the Cutler feasibility project, so Cutler and Winthrop will possibly be redone, so we thought it would be time to invest in Bucher as well and put some of these funds towards Bucher. Moving on to Cutler, again, just going to highlight a few of the big ones. Under our teachers, we're seeing an increase of approximately $73,000. This is mainly attributed to savings of approximately $18,000 from staff turnover. Here you see a reversal in retirement. So somebody who retired, we lowered their salary in the budget last year, but the person who replaced them actually came in higher. So it was actually the reverse, and it was an increase in retirement savings. The next item, which reminds me, is the reverse salary scale advancement. So I had to write down how this works because it's even confusing to me. I was almost going to make a timeline for everyone, but I thought it would be a little unnecessary, but I'm going to try to explain it as best I can. A salary scale reversal is when an employee submits to us for movement on the salary scale for our FY22 budget. Now, to do this, they have to submit the paperwork by December 1st of 2020, almost 2 years prior to when they're going to move. So they give us the paperwork, and I would incorporate it into our FY22 budget, which isn't approved until February of 2021. But there are two deadlines they have to meet in order to move on the salary scale. They have two opportunities. It's either the first day of school in August of 2021, or it's the last day in February of 2022. But remember, we approved our budget nearly 3 weeks before that. So I have to incorporate into the 24 budget, yeah, forget what year I'm in, into the 24 budget, anticipating that these individuals might still meet the second deadline. But these individuals didn't fulfill the paperwork for the next budget, so I can confidently remove them out because they didn't meet the deadline and they're no longer eligible. So that's what I call a salary scale reversal. At the same time, the new deadline is coming up as December 1st. Those people are not included in this initial budget. So the next budget presentation we give to you, we will see a modest increases for the new salary scale advancements that are going to be given on December 1st. Now, if that's confusing, I can definitely make a timeline so you can see it, because I'm sure it's probably confusing because it was for me. But moving on, you can see again that there is an increase of 0.3 specialists at the Cutler Elementary School that accounts for approximately a $29,000 increase. We are seeing a big population of LBLD special education students in the 5th grade graduating up to the middle school. Because of this, we are confident that we can reduce a teacher at the Cutler Elementary School, and we do not need it at the middle school. So the net result is savings to the district of a 1.0 FTE, or roughly $51,000. To offset that, we are adding in a 1.0 moderate special education teacher that you can see here, but we traded in 3 TAs for it. So if you look up over here under other teaching services, this is the opposite end of the 3 TAs. So we removed 3 TAs out of the budget. It saved us approximately $73,000, and we only added in a 1.0 moderate education teacher for $54,000. So this one move alone saved us 2 FTEs and approximately $20,000. This doesn't even include the savings in health insurance. That is presented on a different slide. This is just the salaries alone. The next one on there is $35,000 in steps and another $27,000 in our COLAs. Moving on to other teaching services, as I represented the $73,000 for trading in the 3 FTEs in TAs for the 1.0 moderate special education teacher. In addition to that, at Cutler, we are moving the 7th kindergarten class from Winthrop to Cutler because Cutler is graduating a 5th grade bubble, and they now have room to fit the extra 3rd or 7th kindergarten, and it's 3rd in Cutler's eyes, 7th across the district, whereas Winthrop does not have any more room for that additional bubble because now the kindergarten this year is going to move up to 1st grade. So ultimately, we will see an additional $17,000 for the TA to fill this 3rd kindergarten. The reason we don't see a teacher for the 3rd kindergarten is because that 5th grade bubble now transfers to the kindergarten class, but that does not happen for the TA side of it. In addition, we do have a 1.0 SLP that was transferred from the special ed DAC into the Cutler Elementary School. So you'll see the opposite in the special ed DAC at the end of the presentation. The next big one on this slide is around our pupil services. So for FY23, I think I'm saying this right, we are being required to employ a nurse at the Cutler Elementary School. Registered nurse, sorry. We currently have an LPN. So this is going to be a substantial increase because a certified registered nurse is going to cost a lot more than an LPN. So ultimately, this is increasing our budget by an estimate of approximately $56,000.
A quick question.
Of course.
Who's requiring that?
State. The state required it. They did an audit. When we requested our annual medication delegation, we have to submit the number of RNs at schools, number of kids at each school, and they came back to us and initially denied the delegation because we didn't have an RN in each of the schools. That is a requirement of state law.
Thank you.
So previous to this year, they were able to assign one of the RNs in the district as oversight for the LPN. You can't do that anymore. So we have to make a little bit of a shift.
The next item, just to wrap up Cutler, is the operations and maintenance, where we're seeing an increase of approximately $24,000. This is mainly attributed to a $5,000 COLA increase and an increase to our utilities of approximately $15,000. Next is the Winthrop Elementary School, where we're actually seeing a decrease overall of approximately $27,000, or roughly 0.6%. Excuse me. For here, under teachers again, we're seeing an overall increase of approximately $16,000. The main cause of this lower increase that you would see at other schools is for fiscal 23, we did not need our 3rd pre-K classroom. There wasn't as many special ed students at this age group, so we did not need that 3rd classroom. We also anticipate that this will carry forward into FY24, so we are removing that 3rd pre-K teacher from the budget. You would have saw this in my Q1 forecast either last school committee meeting or the two before it. Again, you see the .3 specialists, as I mentioned before, across all 3 elementary schools. In addition, as I mentioned with our offsets, our ESSER grant is ending this year. Our ESSER grant funded a 1.0 special education teachers. So we are now reducing and not asking for the taxpayers to fund this position. ESSER is ending, and we are removing it from our budget, which lowers our budget by approximately $51,000. In addition to that, just like we saw at Cutler, Winthrop also traded in 3 TAs for 1 teacher. Ultimately here, we saw a savings again of approximately $20,000 in salaries alone. Yes?
Is that trade-off strategic in terms of trying to fill positions? Is the thinking there that it will be easier to find a 1.0 FTE special ed teacher as opposed to 3 TAs that I think have been largely unfilled for parts of the year? Is that right?
Correct. That's exactly why we did it. We could not fill the 3 positions. When we posted the teaching position, it was filled within a week. So.
Okay. So I think that's an important thing for the public to just understand that I will chasten you gently. The way you're framing it makes it sound like it's a beneficial thing, that we're saving money and we're trading it in. And I think we need to be careful that because I think it's possible the public will hear like, well, you're going from 3 people to 1 person. How is that good? And you're excited to save money here. And I think that's why I asked the question. I think it's really important for folks to know that we haven't been able to fill those positions, and this is going to actually so we're going from 0 to a 1 as opposed to a 3 to a 1. So I'm glad that's what I thought you were doing. I just wanted to make that clear. But phrasing wise, I think when you present this, you should
phrase it differently.
I would phrase it as a way of making a more attractive position to fill with a full-time teacher as opposed to 3 TA positions that have been unfilled.
Kind of how yeah.
Quick question. Does that result, that the addition of the special ed teacher result in any reduction in the outsourcing? Or outplacement?
No, I wouldn't.
Of
In the out-of-district placements?
Yeah.
No. Those 2 positions that we switched out are for servicing kids. So initially we had said, okay, 3 TAs are going to cover certain services that kids need that's expected in their IEPs, and we hadn't been able to fill those positions. We found it was easier to hire a professional staff member to help cover those services, and they can cover a little bit more ground. So that was our fallback to not having to deal with compensatory payments later for kids that miss services.
Mm-hmm. And while we have you interrupted, if I'm understanding right, this means now all 3 specialists, music, art, and PE, are all going to be full-time positions?
If this moves forward, yes.
Okay.
Right, there'll be 2 of each full-time.
Great.
Right. So like I kind of said in my Q1 report, I know I use positive terms for everything, but you are correct. Some cases it's not a positive thing, even though we're saving money from it.
Well, I think it actually is a positive thing, because if you've gone from having 3 vacancies, meaning kids are not necessarily getting as much support as they really might need, to getting, an actual teacher there. I mean, I don't know. I think I totally support it. I think it's positive. I think it's just a question of how you present it.
Yep.
It's important to note too, those changes happened this year. Those, this is we're looking at next year's budget, but those changes happened this year already, so that it'll just carry over into next year.
Right.
Okay.
Which was your comment about not having to have compensatory payment for lack of service.
Right.
Yep. Good plan, Mr. Superintendent.
Just to wrap up other teaching services at Winthrop, we did have to this year add in an additional 1.0 FTE special education TA because of a move-in. So that is an addition of about $20,000. Continuing with Winthrop, the next big one is our guidance, counseling, and testing, where we're actually seeing a reduction of $58,000. This is the other ESSER position that was funded through ESSER, the counselor at the Winthrop. Again, we are not seeking funding through the taxpayers for this position, and it is being removed from the budget. Lastly is operations and maintenance, which is the same thing as the other 3 elementary schools. We're seeing an increase of approximately $5,000 for the COLA and an additional $8,000 for our utilities. At the Miles River Middle School, we're seeing an increase of approximately $26,000, or roughly 0.5%. For here, going through our teachers again, we have a staff turnover savings of approximately $25,000. Last year, or this year, in our 23 budget, we had asked to fund an additional 1.0 world language teacher. If some of you remember, Kevin Sano, before she retired, came up here and presented. That was approved, and we put it in our budget. When 23 actually came to be and we saw the enrollment at the middle school, we only needed a 0.4 to fill the world language slots. Therefore, we're rolling that 0.6 savings into 24. This is the same thing that you would have saw in my quarterly forecast a month ago. So from that position, we're realizing a savings of roughly $45,000. Next, for other teaching services, we're seeing a reduction of approximately $27,000. This is mainly attributed to a reduction of a 1.0 moderate special education TA, where we're realizing savings of approximately $22,000. The next big one is our guidance, counseling, and testing, where we're seeing a decrease of approximately $28,000, which is directly attributed to, again, staff turnover, where we saved roughly $38,000. Again, for maintenance and operations, which you'll see through it, is our COLA and our utility costs are increasing. For the regional high school, overall, we're seeing an increase of approximately $160,000, or roughly 2.3%. Under our instructional leadership DESE category, we are seeing a reduction of approximately $23,000, $20,000 being attributed to staff turnover, and an additional $15,000 being removed for the NEASC accreditation. We were accredited this year?
Not yet, but we're
Not
still
yet,
waiting.
but the costs were accredited this year. It's a 3-year process, so we're removing the $15,000 related to that from the budget. You will see that it is being redistributed to the lovely group that presented us before, DECA, and a few other groups that will be on the next slide. But overall, our instructional leadership is dropping $24,000. It's kind of the same thing with teachers, as you've seen in previous slides. For other teaching services, we're seeing a drop of approximately $24,000. Again, this is attributed to another reduction of a 1.0 moderate special education teacher. So I hope you guys can see throughout these numbers, we really took a deep dive into our staffing. Just the salaries alone account for 60% of our budget. So if you really try to maintain your budget, you really have to look at the staffing. So we went through with each principal and went through each person and kind of redistributed their schedule and really tried to fill the gaps and trim down where we could. A lot of it had to do with our TAs. Just to continue with the high school.
Yeah,
Sorry.
David, yeah.
Yep.
If it's 60% for salaries, what's the percentage on the special ed out-of-district placement?
About 11% of the overall budget.
11%, thank you.
Is that what? Yep.
Yep.
A next big one is our pupil services. Again, where you see a reverse staff turnover that actually costs us $16,000, but this is where you see that other $15,000 item that was removed from instructional leadership that is going to be used to help offset costs for the DECA National Conference, as well as additional core trainings and stamp testing for freshmen. For maintenance and operations, we are seeing an increase of approximately $52,000, which, like the other slides, is COLA and utilities. But in addition to that, as you remember, we had a gas leak at the high school. Tom had requested that we perform a study and see if the other gas lines are aging. So he requested a small sum of money. Right now, we do have that out to quote. So kind of the feedback we're getting is that might not be enough money to fulfill the study. So between now and the final budget, you might see that number adjusted. Next up is athletics, where we're seeing an overall increase of $65,000, or roughly 12%. For athletics, it all falls into one DESI category, which is pupil services. Here, our major increases are again around transportation, the increased costs for officials, league dues, and a small increase for supplies. Those items amount up to an increase of about $6,000. In addition to that, our athletic director has requested an increase of approximately $10,000 to help offset scholarships. Right now in the 23 budget, we have $15,000 dedicated to scholarships. This will now boost it up to $25,000. In our FY23 budget, you approved a match to user fees of approximately 45.5%. To maintain that 45.5%, we need to increase the cost of the district approximately $16,000 because the cost of running the athletics has increased due to transportation and league dues and everything else that's going on. In addition to that, athletic director has requested that we increase that match to 50%. So that 4.5% increase reflects an additional $28,000 to user fees. So in total, it's about a $40,000 increase to our user fees. Next is the central office, where we're seeing an overall increase of $273,000, or roughly 7.3%. The very first item, administration, is seeing an overall increase of $130,000. The very first item is an increase to our payroll administrator. Currently, we have a part-time payroll administrator that is here on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to process payroll, because payroll has to get to the bank by Wednesday afternoon in order for it to go through on Friday. When everyone gets their check on Friday, guess who's not there? The payroll person. So everyone's coming into my office, and I'm dealing with mostly payroll all day Friday. So I'm requesting that we increase that by 0.2, which would mean one more day, and it would allow the payroll administrator to be here on Friday when we actually issue payroll. Yes?
Can I ask why you have persistent weekly problems with payroll so that your entire Friday is consumed with questions about it? That would seem to be something that shouldn't be happening.
I don't know how to answer that other than I don't understand why people don't know how to calculate their pay. There's just a lot of questions on why is my pay like this, and how come my health insurance deductions are so high, and why does it change?
Every week?
Every week, yes. Every week.
Okay.
Yep. And then in addition to that, we do have $56,000 in new enhancements to our district-wide technology. This includes Panorama, Vector. We're transferring things to the cloud. We're moving our budget sense to the cloud, and we have revamped our website, which ultimately costs us more annually for this improved website. In addition, we are seeing a substantial increase in our pupil services of approximately $130,000. This is mainly attributed to our transportation contract, it going up approximately 13%. This line alone is costing $123,000. Next is maintenance, where we're actually recognizing a decrease of $321,000, or roughly 35%. That might shock you, but if you look at the very last line, it's because in FY23, we added in the one-time offset for E&D of $325,000 for extraordinary maintenance. That is going away because, again, it was our one-time offset for FY23. Sorry, I skipped one. The very top line, the $12,000 for staff turnover. In 23, our Director of Maintenance and Facilities had requested that we add in a maintenance technician. They were going to hire either a plumber, electrician, or an HVAC. When 23 actually came, He had changed his mind and asked us for a district-wide floating custodian, which would fall in the custodian's contract and ultimately be paid less than what we would have paid a certified plumber, electrician, or an HVAC. Therefore, we're realizing a reduction to the budget of approximately $12,000 for the change in staff personnel. Next is benefits and fixed charges, where we're seeing, again, a decrease of approximately $1.7 million or 20%. Just to point out again, it's the same thing that we saw in the maintenance category. We have our one-time offset of OPEB in our FY23 budget that is now going to be removed for our FY24 budget. But other than the $2 million we are removing for OPEB, we are still adding in an additional $50,000 to OPEB, which is our normal schedule to increase it every year by $50,000 until I believe the year 2035. I could be off a few years right there. But so in all, our OPEB would drop approximately $1.95 million. In addition to that, we are seeing an increase in our health insurance costs. Our premium rate has is estimated to increase while our enrollment is dropping a little bit. The end result is an increase of approximately $148,000, as well as increases to our mandatory Essex retirement contribution, which Frank had mentioned before. This is an estimate. This final number comes out in about mid-December. So between now and the final budget, this number will be adjusted. Right now, I put in a placeholder for approximately 10%. Historically, it's bounced between 5 and 8. Just to be cautious in the initial budget, I put in 10%. So hopefully it just goes south from there. The next DESI section is our capital acquisitions, improvement and replacement of fixed assets and transfers. So here, every item on this list is offsets to our E&D, which I've summarized at the end, but just to briefly go over them now, we are requesting to fully fund the capital stabilization fund that we got approval for in our October town meeting. We're allowed to put in approximately $1.7 million, and we are using this to directly offset the E&D. In addition to that, we're requesting to use $275,000 to replace smartboards across the district. So this hasn't happened in probably 10 years, and they're failing left and right. So we would like to use this money to aggressively attack the smartboards across the district. We are going to focus, though, on the high school, middle school, and Bucher, obviously, because we're hoping Cutler gets entered into the program. In addition to that, and you've heard me say this multiple times, is the high school auditorium lighting project. We tried funding this last year, but it came in substantially higher than we thought, so we're hoping to use $300,000 of our E&D to upgrade the auditorium lighting. Next is special education. We're seeing an increase of $617,000, or roughly 9.4%. The big ticket items here are around our teachers, where our Director of Student Services has requested an additional $12,000 to amp up our summer school and bring in more teachers to help provide instruction during the summer. This is where you also, under other teaching services, this is where you see the other side of the SLP that was transferred over to Winthrop. In addition, the two big items that I'm going to highlight for a minute are the pupil services and tuitions. So right now, we will openly admit that these numbers are big, and both Eric and I and Stacy Busick, our Director of Student Services, has already dedicated at least 2 meetings a week from now till January, focusing on these two numbers. We really need to get a better handle on the tuition costs, on how many out-of-district students we currently have, how many are graduating, and how many new move-ins we have, as well as the increased routes to our transportation. So as it stands, we need to add almost 3 or 4 additional routes for transportation. Each of those routes is almost $50,000 a route. And on top of that, we're seeing transportation increase of approximately 13%. So you add all that together, and transportation alone for our out-of-district students is going up nearly $325,000. In addition to that, as we mentioned before, the OSD, the Operational Services Division, has approved, as it's at the moment, has approved a 14% increase to out-of-district tuitions. So you combine the 14% with the additional move-ins that Student Services is projecting, equates to an increase to our tuitions of $335,000. So I'll just say it again, we are going to dedicate a lot of time to these 2 items, so I anticipate that there will be changes from now till the final budget is voted on. I believe last but not least is technology, where we're seeing just a modest increase of roughly $3,000 or 0.3%. This really is a lot of ins and outs, but just to summarize it, he did request an additional $16,000 to replace teachers' laptops that are aging. That is being offset by a smaller grade 7 class. Therefore, we have less iPads to purchase. But to offset that, there are increased enrollment at the elementary level, so we do need more iPads at the elementary level. And then last is a decrease of roughly $30,000 in software. This relates to the removal of the Google Workspace, the removal of Lexia and STEM scopes that are now being purchased at the building level and not the district-wide technology level, as well as additions to BrainPop and Seesaw. So the net result on our software is a decrease of approximately $30,000. So that does it for kind of each of the individual DACs and locations. I know the E&D was kind of spread out throughout much of the presentation, so I just tried to develop this slide so it's all on one slide, and you can see what we are doing with our E&D. Just to walk you through it, the balance on June 30, which you heard Frank mention, is roughly $4.4 million. At this time, we would like to exercise our ability to reserve 3% of our budget, which is approximately $1.2 million. That leaves approximately $3.1 million available for use in this budget. As I had mentioned, we are requesting $1.7 million for the Capital Stabilization Fund, $275,000 for the smart boards, $300,000 for the high school auditorium lighting project, $126,000 for the Bucher School auditorium upgrades, which is a combined total of $2.4 million. But as you can see, there's still $773,000 left over. That is not being offset. That will directly be returned to the towns through the budget process and will offset the increases that you see here. This is the same number that's been haunting me for 3 years, which is the Chapter 70 money left over from FY21 that just doesn't seem to want to go away and will probably still be here next year. But nonetheless, we have fulfilled our promise the second or third year in a row and utilized E&D to return the money to the towns and offset our general increase. So when you combine everything together, we're seeing an increase to Hamilton when you combine both the operating and debt of approximately 6.9%, an increase to Wenham of approximately 3%, and an overall increase of 5.5%. Now, I will apologize, and I'll send you this deck, but I did slide this one in that is not in your presentation. As I was going over it with everyone in my office, they started asking me questions, and I realized I didn't really put a summary slide of all the major changes. So just to highlight some of them, just in order, this is the major changes year over year. I tried to categorize all of them so you could see where all this money is coming from and where it's flowing. I know it's small, so I'll kind of say them and also email it to you when I go sit down. But again, just the big ones is the Capital Stabilization Fund, our COLA across the district for the 305 FTEs that we currently have costs $427,000. This is a combination of 2%, the 1-1 split, the 3% for 4% for custodians, and whatever administrators received. So again, 427 across the district. Our out-of-district tuitions is $335,000. Our out-of-district special education transportation is $324,000. I went over the offsets. The steps that teachers, TAs, and office personnel receive, 108 employees are scheduled to receive step increases next year. That totals an increase of approximately $264,000. Our health insurance represents a $152,000 increase. Our general education transportation is $123,000. Our estimated Essex retirement contribution, $106,000. Our utilities across the district are estimated to increase by $76,000. Athletics is $61,000, and I will skip down to the big ones at the bottom. Some of this is being offset by our reverse salary scale lane changes, where we're saving $16,000. We have retirement savings currently on 2 employees that is saving us approximately $30,000. As well as turnover on 49 different positions, which adds up to a savings of $82,000. Overall, the budget is seeing a reduction of 7.2 FTEs. The net combination of this is savings of $225,000. And then the removal of our one-time FY23 E&D offsets for extraordinary maintenance and OPEB. I believe that is it. So I will take any questions if you have them.
Quick question. You're shifting to a cloud-based with BudgetSense. What's the approximate shift in expense from that?
About $7,000 increased for our current cost on BudgetSense.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Just so people are aware, I think about 7 years ago, there was a decision made to keep it on premises. And by doing that, we missed out on a number of updates over the years that don't happen when you're on premises. Like, you get basic security updates, but we have the ability through BudgetSense. I spent all summer trying to figure this out, but BudgetSense can actually allow employees to log in and see their own information. Time off, they can request time. It's all built into the system, but in order to do that, you need to move it to the cloud-based system. So we'll do that in the spring after Vinny's done playing with all the numbers, but it's a good opportunity for us to enhance our services to our employees as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits, I think.
What's that?
I think there's a lot of benefits to that shift.
I have a couple questions that I'm just looking really, I'm sort of trying to think about the questions that other people might have. And in the budget detail under the central office programs, I'm not sure if this was a formatting change or what it was, but there's actually 2 different sections that are titled curriculum and instruction. I'm looking at page 18 of 25 on the second exhibit, if that's helpful to you.
Oh, on the other exhibit?
On the other exhibit? And it's confusing because there's literally 2 sections. I know that Excel duplication drives you crazy. So I'm wondering if that's...
I can look, but I think I got to dismount off this to do it.
Okay. So as you're looking at that, I don't understand why there would be 2 sections of the same heading. And I'm wondering if you somehow or other cut and pasted or did something there.
Certainly could have. What page did you say it was?
It's pages 18 and 19 of the second exhibit. So under other office expenses, there's a section titled curriculum and instruction. Then it goes section 504, substitute salaries, ELL, and then there's a second whole section for curriculum and instruction. I think that's going to confuse people.
Yes, one was meant for, I believe that's been there for a long time. I definitely should change the title on it, but one, it was supposed to be curriculum and instruction for just the office at central office, whereas the other one is district-wide, meaning all the PD across the district. So they definitely should be relabeled, I agree.
Okay.
Yep.
So then related to that, I'm having a hard time. There's so many titles that are the same, and I know that this has been a sticking point for people over the years. There's this constant refrain, central offices, too many people, too many people. I know, I'm just looking at it, there's this line, district extended responsibilities. I'm now looking in the second part of curriculum instruction.
Yep.
Then there's secondary PD coordinator, secondary curriculum coordinator, elementary curriculum coordinator, elementary reading specialist, elementary PD coordinator. All of those positions put together are still just 2.0. And so I guess, are those positions that we sort of combined as Jen Clifford's job has morphed into something different? And at some point, would it be helpful to just, because I think her
I can
title
give
is
you an
Director of
explanation for that.
Curriculum, right?
Correct. She oversees curriculum as well as PD. So when we do our EPIMS report and report it out to the state, they ask us how many FTEs are in each section. They also reconcile that to our end-of-year report where we report how much of their salaries went to each line.
I
So
see.
technically, it does have to be broken out into the two different lines because she oversees two
So
different
fundamentally, the
functions.
line that's the .5 elementary curriculum coordinator and the .5 elementary PD coordinator,
Yep, it's
those
half.
two lines constitute Jen's Clifford position.
Correct,
Correct.
correct.
Yes.
Which break out to her two different responsibilities, which connect to our EPIMS reports and our end-of-year report, which the state
Okay.
uses
I just want to make sure that
compare.
these are the kind of things that I think unless someone sits in budget meetings, might look at
They
that
wouldn't
and
know,
just say.
yes, yep.
My other question is, and this is just, I'm noticing it as a bit of a huge change year over year. And I'm curious to know how about free school lunch has affected it, if at all. But the line for food services has, decreased from a high point a couple of years ago of 157,000 to now we're budgeting only 50,000. And I know that cafeteria workers are one of the positions we've had a really hard time filling. So how, and I don't see that there's a line item for food services anywhere else in the budget. So where else are the cafeteria workers shown?
Yep. So cafeteria almost serves as its own function. They are one of the only departments that can generate a profit throughout the year and roll it over. So they're technically in their own revolving account that has nothing to do with the district-wide budget. There's only one line item, you're correct, in the budget for food service, and that's because historically, they've always ran a deficit. So the district budgeted a sum of money to bail them out.
But now that we have free school lunch,
Correct. But
Okay.
we don't know what next year is going to bring. Next year may not be free, and we may not turn a profit because of that next year. So we have left $50,000 in case.
free school lunch does not continue. And then, so you're saying then that the entire cafeteria budget is not actually part of this budget at all?
That is correct. They're not represented anywhere in here. Because that has nothing to do with the assessment to the towns.
It's like a standalone,
Yes, it's kind of funny, I was having these
Quasi-governmental.
conversations like this year, should we add them in the back of the budget book just to say, hey, there's this other, group of 15 people over here and another $1 million, but it has nothing to do with,
but they're not assessed, you're saying they're not part of this at all? They are
correct,
like a
not part of it at
standalone-
all. Yep,
But they're still subject to your oversight and superintendents. I mean, it's still part
Yes.
of the same.
yep, definitely, yep. They're just not calculated in any of the assessments because technically they're supposed to either break even
Or
or
make a
generate a
profit.
small
Modest
profit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And that 157 you're seeing, that's not the budget, that's the actuals.
Yeah, the way
So that year, we budgeted 35,000
Yeah, I noticed
for
that. That
their-
was, yeah.
But
that-
they were actually ended the year in a deficit of 157.
Right. Well, yeah, when I scrolled down, it was hard to see the
Yeah.
top. Okay.
Yep. Which is why we increased it a little bit the next year, but then that's when free lunch kicked in, so.
It's such a guessing game. Okay. That makes sense. I think, yeah, if there's a way you can tidy up that C&I section.
I agree. I should 100% relabel that.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you for noticing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jen, one other question I've heard. The Human Resources Director position, has that actually been filled this year, or has that also been vacant this whole year?
That is now filled. It was vacant for the beginning part of it, but it's filled now.
Oh, good.
Yep. Yes.
can we look at the athletics slide, which is slide 26?
Yep. Should just go, but it doesn't. It's gonna be source. Yeah, I can. Yeah. If you just hit it once, it kind of moves on its own.
Okay, so you have a line item there for $6,600 for an increase in transportation officials' dues and supplies.
Correct.
But then you have another increase, 16.3, to maintain the 45.5% match.
Yep.
That 16.3, when you were, and this may have just been you misspeaking, you said that was for increases in transportation officials, league dues and supplies. So are we double counting that?
So Craig will be here in 2 meetings to present. He can clarify it better than me, but I can explain it to you.
Okay.
So when Craig builds his budget, there's set meets. I'll just use football as an example. There's 5 games. He knows he needs 5 sets of buses to transport them. But if they then go into tournaments where they need additional games and additional buses, he doesn't budget for that in the user fee. He budgets for it in the district-wide money.
Got it.
So we don't charge the students for a fee that might not happen. So transportation is both in the main line and the user fee line. So it increased in both spots, but not the same bus per se.
We might just want to say increases in to postseason tournaments.
Yeah.
Just to clarify that.
Yep.
I think that would have solved it right there.
When you have a year like we're having so far, every team hit the tournament this year.
I know, and
That
soccer's
all
been amazing.
falls on us as an expense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't incorporate that in the 45.5.
Yep. And that's fine. I just, like I said, if you added like.
Yeah, definitely, I'll
postseason,
clarify on it.
I
Yep.
wouldn't have had any questions.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, Julia?
I forgot about Julie.
Hi. My only question is around the $300,000 for the high school lighting project, and I'm on the Capital Finance Committee. I obviously voted to approve it, to recommend it, but I wonder where, just for the public's knowledge, where that number came from. Is that based on estimates, or is it based on what other schools have done, or is it just like a conservative estimate of what we think we're going to need to really fix the lighting situation in the auditorium?
Yep, so in, was it last year? It must have been last year.
It was last year.
Yeah, in FY22, we had requested approximately $50,000 to do the project. We had put it out to quote. It came back at roughly $220,000, which is why we abandoned the project. I incorporated more funding because of all the inflation and the crazy supply chain issues. I rounded it up to 300. So it's both based on an actual quote of approximately 220,000 as well as additional funds, so we don't run into the same problem where I did not anticipate enough funding. If this actually occurs and the quote comes back, a year from now for 250, we certainly would either just not spend the 50 and kind of return it to E&D, or try to make additional upgrades to the project. There's a vast amount of lighting in there, so we could go through and pick off lights left and right and add it to the project. So some of those lights go for almost $10,000 a piece. And there's a lot of lights in there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I do have one question. Is it a state mandate that you have to have school buses?
It's a regional district, you do.
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, because we're a regional school, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Thank you, guys. There will
Thank
be
you.
a lot of work between now and then. Hopefully, gladly, I am going on paternity leave. So.
He keeps telling me that, I don't know
I
why.
had to
but-
throw that in there.
But I think it's important to note, this is our first pass. We just kind of incorporated everything we heard from all of our budget holders. We'll go back now and chip away at it and really finalize some numbers between now and January, because as Vinny said, some of the things like our actual insurance quote, we don't know yet. We're just guessing, and we're going to guess high just in case. Same with some of the other contracts that come up. Some of the things that we know, like our transportation costs of over $100,000, we know that there's a contract. That's what it is. That's what it's going to be from now till the end of the budget process. So some things will move. We're going to dig into special ed a little bit more deeply. We're looking at some of our state aid calculations, looking at how some of those turn over year to year, and just trying to also equalize the budget. Next meeting, you will see the student counts, so class size reports. It was going to be during this meeting, but I figured with all the things that were originally scheduled, we'd be going until 11 o'clock, so I moved it to next meeting. But that'll be important to look at as a committee, to be able to see some of the moves that we'll make as we move forward. Then you'll have a better understanding of some of the things we took out could float back in over time, depending on trade-offs. We're trying to also be fiscally responsible, understand the needs of the towns, understand that right now, that 6.8% on Hamilton would cause some angst and really shuts down anything they want to do on the town side. So I think it's important for us to continue to try and work that with them and help find some balance. So we met with the town manager, town assistants, and their finance people, and then I think it's next Monday. We have the chairs meeting again, so we'll go through the budget with them. And then by the time we bring back that next iteration, there'll be changes across the budget. So just be prepared for that. And certainly if you see anything along the way, reach out to Vinny or myself while he's here. He keeps threatening to go, but anything you need will help out, and certainly we'll continue to chip away at this. So thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, I'm noticing that I have clock.
I got your clock.
Thank you.
You asked.
All right, next up, we have the superintendent's report.
All righty. So there are a number of things going on. I think it's an interesting time of the year. It's this transition between seasons, if you will. So our fall seasons are ending, and we're moving into our winter season, which will bring a number of things, including all new sporting events, but it also brings our musical, it brings our winter concerts. So all those exciting things that are coming up in the next month or so. And I think it's important to just note to kind of keep your eyes on the calendars as things pop up. One of the big things coming up really quickly is the musical. We've spent quite a bit of money trying to make sure the auditorium works for now. So it's going to hopefully be able to pull that off. We had to move it, and now it's on December 8th, 9th, and 10th at 6:30, and that'll be in the Farini. And then congratulations to our sports team. Several of them made it into deeper into the tournaments, to the 16ths and the 8ths, and really pushed hard and did a great job, and appreciate the work of our athletes and our coaches along the way. And just a reminder for people, next week is Wednesday's a half day, and Thursday obviously is Thanksgiving. We wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and hope that people get time to rest and relax, including our staff members, and take a little time and take a deep breath. And then certainly want to thank Vinny for his work. He's been nose down in the budget for a number of weeks now, trying to do the audit, do the the kind of quarterly and then also the budget process at the same time, so he's juggling a lot. So thank you to Vinny, and that's all I have for this evening.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have questions for the superintendent? Okay. All right, committee reports next. Capital Finance. Jen?
So we met this week and we talked about budget. So this is
Imagine
my
that.
second round with
Yep.
most of this information. And Vinny was super helpful in answering any questions that any of us had.
Great. Thank you. So next up, I realize, you know, that we put the policy, we put this under committee reports. These are really, we do have some things, but they are first readings. So we don't anticipate that these are a vote next time. They would come up for a vote. So I guess it is, could have been on new business, but I'm going to throw it to you,
It's
Anna.
a pleasure of the chair, however you want to do it. So what you have tonight are our first reading of the H section, which is about negotiations, and the J section, which is about students. Not to be super confusing, in the old world order, H used to be students and is now J in the MASC world, so enjoy that. What Dorothy did for us, which was really helpful, is put together an index which sort of has the headings of what you're looking at. H is very brief and frankly sort of, what the word is, guidance. I wouldn't really say there's strong policy per se there. There's some goals. It's all about negotiating, outside negotiators. So H is relatively easy to get through. J is a monster, and I think it's starting to blend together for me. I want to say that we started J my first year on the subcommittee, maybe, but Michelle Horgan was very involved with the J section. Current committee has been involved with the J section. There is a lot to it. There is a lot that changed. It is a huge policy section, and it pertains to lots and lots of things that people are highly interested in. So what you have in terms of exhibits are an index, sort of a red line, if you will, which I'll just put this out here for anyone who's not on policy subcommittee. You'll often see multiple policies with the same name and number, and you'll think to yourself, what is this mess? And what we have been doing over the last several years is taking the old Hamilton Wenham version and aligning it to the MASC version. So oftentimes you see 2, in some cases even 3 versions of it. So if you're really interested in Redline, you can read all about it. And then you'll also have what Dorothy sort of called the clean section, which is where we landed, that barring major objections at a future meeting, we would be adopting the clean section of the policy. Anything is open for discussion. I've already noticed, I'll just say, in looking at it, that I want to talk to Dorothy about the index. She's missed one of them that I know we've approved. It's JICK. That was part of the anti-discrimination policies. There's some spacing issues I want to ask her about. There's a few policies that have red type and highlighting. And to be honest, I think the MASC does this so much, and you have to imagine Dorothy is customizing literally hundreds of policies for multiple districts at the same time. So my gut feeling is that she just needs to go back through and say, yep, that was a flag to myself. I need to change it, and that's fine. The only other thing that I wanted to mention to this group that I noticed is there are a few places where those protected classes creep back up again. The first one has the Crown Act language in it, which I'm sure was purposeful, but there is a later policy, JIC, that does not have that. And again, my gut says that the MASC just didn't update their tree after that was passed, and sort of an oversight. But I would like to ask Dorothy about it on Monday when we all get together. There's a couple other places where protected classes are mentioned, but they're not in the same vein. So I just wanted to note them that, especially around student equity and student discipline, there's some places where groups are there, but it's not the full list. So again, if you say to yourself, but wait, this is not the full list. If you look at the context of the policy, it sort of makes sense why you wouldn't have the full list there. So we've worked really hard on it. We feel like it's pretty good, but I am open to questions. I'm not sure if anyone's even read all of it, which is why I think it's really good to have a first reading before we get there. And my final comment is, as you can imagine, the entire point of this is to align with the MASC and updated Attorney General guidance. So in all honesty, the policy subcommittee we're not really writing a lot ourselves. We're sort of looking and editing, but none of us are lawyers, and none of us work for the MASC, and none of us work for the Attorney General's office. So there's a lot of guidance given from Dorothy, and we sort of look at it and decide what we want to keep and what we don't. And for the most part, our prior policies are very similar. Every so often we'll come across one that's really different, and those are the ones that are hard to reconcile, to understand what changed and why it changed and what we need to do. So I will stop talking now and entertain questions from the field.
I just wanted to say thank you for submitting the red line. I always like to see that because I know exactly what's changed.
Amy could make a chart.
I could.
Yeah, that was, it's a lot. I did appreciate, I was trying to pull up which one of them was actually titled Clean Version, which I thought was hysterical. Like, I was like,
As opposed to.
where's the other version? Anyway. So, well, does anyone have any questions on what? No. So I guess I don't have any detailed questions. I do have, and I think this, you alluded to this, I do have concerns about making sure in the long run that these are all properly, I guess, posted on the website in a way that this transition is messy, as you've stated, in terms of being able to easily find these. So that's, I think that's a couple of steps down the road, but I do want to make sure that is.
I think that this actually came up because Janelle herself noticed it, that what's currently on the website is in alignment to the new sections, but there's a blend. In some cases, those section headings reflect the new policies, in other cases not. And H is really the best example. So if you go to our current website right now, it says Section H, negotiations. That's in anticipation of what you are now looking at for Section H. But when you open it up, you have all of these old H, which again, if you look carefully at the titles, the old H is going to become the new J under students. And if you look at what's currently under students, there's hardly anything there except for the 3 policies that we had already adopted in full, which were JICK, and then the concussion policies.
Yeah, that actually, well, that's exactly what I was, not necessarily that, but that's what my concern is that it's kind of an in-between, we're in an in-between
It is
state right now.
100% in between, and the sooner we finish, the less in between we will be.
Okay. So what do you anticipate next? In other words, do you anticipate that we would put these on for a vote at our next meeting, or are we waiting for anything else? What's the policy subcommittee dream of this?
I don't know that we've dreamt about it, but I would say as a best practice, I think it's really important that this full committee gets a chance to read them in detail. And this is a lot for now and then. Unless somebody is ready to have substantive questions now, I personally think we might want to put it on for a second reading, but not a vote.
Okay.
With the idea that folks, if they really want to take the time to read them, can bring questions to the second reading. And then assuming that we don't have major problems, knocking on wood here, that potentially we might do a third reading and a final vote. We could vote after the second reading. You might want to notice it as possible, but for example, if Jen has a really solid question that we need to circle back to Dorothy about, I don't want to omit the opportunity for that to happen.
So do you want to put it on the 15th?
For the third vote?
Well, do you want to put it right on the next agenda, or give people
I think
some
we
time?
should keep moving, partly because
Yeah,
not
I do
to
too.
make everyone nervous. There's going to be more because the next policy subcommittee meeting, we're going to probably have a couple more that are getting close. So it's conceivable at the next meeting we could have a couple second readings for these 2, and we could have a first reading for some others.
Okay.
And I guess, one of the benefits of having that redlined document is that, hopefully those are the ones, it allows the committee to see where which policies have been drastically changed, or, you know, so that you can really dig in, to Jen's point about what's different. Okay.
The only other caveat I'll offer is that in some cases, Hamilton Wyndham did not have its own policy, and nothing existed, so there was nothing to change. So if you come across something where we don't have an old version and you only see the MASC version, that's because we never had it in the first place.
Right.
That was one of the things we've been working to correct too, is we have some deficiencies where we just didn't address it at all, but now we do.
Okay.
Can I just ask that it get moved to the 15th? I'd really like to particularly read through the J policy really carefully, and it's final exams and coming up, and I will not have time to devote to
So,
that before.
I mean, we can push them, I mean, as much time as people need. Like I said, there's a lot.
It's just the J one I would like to look at a second time.
I think that's reasonable, but I also think we need to just be prepared. It sounds like there might be other ones coming on top of it.
Yeah, the other ones that are coming close are D, which are the financial policies, which are related to the audit. So there's a little bit of, I don't want to say urgency, but semi-urgency. The I section is instructional. That's pretty heavy. K and J are relatively short,
Okay.
but there are a few that are bigger.
Right. I feel like it's reasonable to put it onto the 15th, but I would take, if there's other people that have thoughts about.
My only comment is I think I have an unusual scheduling conflict on December 15th. I might not be able to be here for that meeting, but who's the vice chair of the subcommittee? You, I think?
It's me.
Yeah, Amy can
Amy is.
run the show.
Sure.
Sorry.
I mean, if you're not going to be here, I can do the first. It's fine. I'll
So
make the time.
I guess I also, I mean, one question I have is, in other words, let's just say for a hypothetical, that there are, say, one policy or two policies of all of these that we feel like, in other words, perhaps if we were to bring it on the first, we might be ready to vote on some portion of this and not necessarily, right? I mean, that could happen.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Right, so in other words, if we were to bring this all forth before the committee again on the first for a second reading, it's possible that the committee could say, well, we're ready to vote on.
Yeah, we could
This
always just
part.
hold a couple of them
Right.
for a later, and to be honest, my gut feeling is if someone has a pretty substantive question, we're going to have to bring it back, and I would want Dorothy's opinion on some of it too, because it's,
So, I mean, in other words, I see it somewhat, because it is the way that it is, I envision it being somewhat like a consent agenda, that there would be, perhaps certain policies someone might identify that they wanted to have a further discussion about, but it's likely that many of the policies, there might not be much in the way of
Yeah.
discussion.
I think it'd be better if we can keep it moving as much as possible, just because, like I said, there will be more that's coming down, so.
Okay, all right, so we'll put it on for December 1st, and we will
Hope
see
for
how
the
it goes.
best. Can we notice it as possible vote?
Huh?
Can we notice it as possible vote, second reading and possible vote?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think what I would anticipate is putting it on second, we'll call it second reading, it'll be up in new business, it'll be
Okay.
certainly something that we could vote on. Okay. All right. I assume there's nothing else from policy?
Do you really want more?
Just being polite. All right. Negotiations, we have not met, unless you have anything, David. Okay. All right. I don't have much in the chair's report, but I did, which I could have held the grants, but under the consent agenda, but I did want to just acknowledge those two, there were two really substantial Ed Fund grants that we approved, we accepted earlier in the meeting. One is a Project Adventure Social Emotional Learning Intervention Grant for they're both, over in the $20,000. One is $23,000, and the other one is an Ed Fund grant for the a CNC router project, which I read a lot to try to understand, and it sounds
Really cool.
yeah,
Wait till you see it.
yeah. Well, and I was involved a long time ago in the plasma cutter, and I was trying to really get my head around the differences. But it's also a really significant grant for $27,000. I just wanted to acknowledge those are both really exciting, and to see the work that the Ed Fund is doing, and to see the work that the teachers are doing in order to make those grants come alive. So just wanted to acknowledge that. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah, that's really
I didn't really have anything else. This isn't officially, not really officially. I went, but I did, and I saw Amy there. We both attended the Hamilton, there was a community meeting regarding the sort of vision for the community, for the potential for the Gordon Conwell property. And mostly it was just, it was a great discussion. It was just a well-run discussion, and it was exciting to see a large community presence.
Yeah.
It was, I think, I saw in the paper it said 100 people. I would have guessed more than 100.
Sure.
It was really packed there at the community house. So anyway, sort of just community information, really. All right. Does anyone have topics for future meetings? Anyone? Okay.
Maybe the Wynnum master plan.
Yeah. Do you want to update us?
Well, there's, I'd rather do this at the next meeting, but.
I can do that. We can put it on the next one. Yeah, sure.
But the brief statement, they've got each of the attendees there to put together 4 or 5-person focus panels that each, and then sort of, it's sort of a pyramid scheme. You then get them to put together focus panels. So they're trying to maximize outreach, and they have a structured questionnaire that the facilitator at each of those needs to do.
Okay, great. Well, we can put it on the upcoming agenda. And when is the next meeting, do you know?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Yep, we can put it on
But we
for,
can potentially co-opt some members here to, that are Wenham residents.
yeah, I was going to say.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's,
This block, Hamilton block over.
yeah, no, but we'll put an update on a future agenda. That sounds
Okay, thank you.
good. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. All right. Unless anyone has any other things, I would entertain a motion to adjourn if someone would like to do that.
So moved.
All right,
So moved
motion by David.
At 9:18 PM.
All right, I'm going to take yours as a second. Anna, all right.
Yes.
We have to vote by roll call. David Polito, David Frankel,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Anna,
Yes.
Dana's a yes, Jen,
Yes.
Julia.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And we are adjourned. Okay.